We are live. Hopefully, we are. Hello and welcome, SuccessGrid Nation, to this episode of the SuccessGrid podcast live with your host, Hussein Talib. In this episode, I have with me Dr. Hope Zoeller. She is the founder and president of Hope, helping other people excel, a firm that specializes in facilitating leader success at every level of an organization. Dr. Zoeller worked at UBS in various roles, including customer service, training and development, and employment relations. So she has been consulting with organization on leadership development for the past 17 years. Hope, welcome to the Success Great podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me and allowing me to talk about my passion, developing leaders.
Awesome. So speaking of that, I want to start with this. Being a great leader starts with me and ends with we. This is something that you submitted into. So can you expand on that?
So the starting with me and ending with we is, first of all, as leaders, having self-awareness about who we are and how we're showing up. And, I often have leaders that are not completely in check with that. And so, when I'm doing one-on-one leadership coaching, we'll do an assessment, a 360 assessment, where we get feedback from all of the people that they influence, their employees, their peers, their boss. And it's interesting when you find a leader that thinks that they're doing a really amazing job and the feedback comes back otherwise. And so, it starts with me and ends with we, is I've got to be in touch with my strengths. And I don't like to call them weaknesses. I like to call them opportunities. But I need to know where I am as a leader. And then I can, from that standpoint of if I know what I'm amazing at, build a team of people that can do things that I can't do. And I release my ego from that. And in leadership, that is probably the number one thing that can kill a team faster than anything, that it's a leader with a huge ego and won't allow people to grow and thrive. And, all of the data that is out there, the number one reason why people leave organizations is because of the leader, poor leadership. They will tell you, I like the organization, I just couldn't work for this individual. I just couldn't work for this person. So, being a leader, I believe, is an honor and a privilege, but it also requires us to look within ourselves and how are we showing up. And it's not, it's a lot I say about, being a parent. It's not about what I need. It's about how can I best serve my people? How can I take care of them? And so I've got to know where I am, and I've got to know where my strengths are, and then be able to, engage other people to help all of us be successful.
Exactly. Yeah, that's important. Like you mentioned with the example with the kids, especially when they are born, newborns, and like you can't ask anything of the kids. you have you have to nurture and take care of them, and as they grow up, take them into a certain path that will lead more leaders, right?
Yes. And that should be, every leader's legacy should be creating more leaders. And, I've worked with leaders that were so afraid of developing other leaders because that was a threat to their own power. And,
Exactly.
and I say, if that's how you're leading, you're not truly leading. It's more
Exactly.
about managing, because managing is a lot about processes. I believe leadership is completely about people, and you need both. But the most amazing leaders are the ones that lean into people and aren't afraid if those people go higher than they are.
Yeah, exactly. But why leaders are afraid of this? Because they're afraid of other people below them taking their place. Is it about the position, the money that they're getting? Is it like we are self-absorbed in general, people that they want all the benefits for themselves and they do not want to share things?
They do not want to share things. And I remember when I first got promoted into management, when I was in corporate America, the very first day, my manager said to me, start looking for your replacement. And I thought, what? I just got promoted. Give me a chance. I'm not going to fail. But his whole point is, if you have aspirations of going on and doing more, you always need to be looking around at who could be you. Who could you develop and nurture and grow? And that is the mindset from which you lead. Not that, people wanting my job is a threat to my job security. It's, always be looking around at how you can help make people better. And that to me is one of the biggest responsibilities. And again, I believe an honor and a privilege to be able to do is help to develop people and where they want to go and what they want to do. And maybe that's not always working for you. Probably not, but you've put somebody out there into the world and helped, have a piece of their development, not in a selfish way, but, in a very giving servant leadership type way.
Yeah. So what leaders now should do to like be real leaders and get leaders more in the way, and what like employees should be doing like to get, let's say, this kind of mentorship or people that are supporting them and they want them to be better, like because you mentioned earlier, as humans, like I could be good at like one thing, two things, great at one, two, three things, but I can't be great at like 100 things, right? So we need each other like to excel in the business, in the corporation.
Yes, yes. And I tell people all the time, how we say it takes a village to raise a child? It takes a village to raise a leader. We just don't get here by ourselves. I mean, it's leadership is not a solo journey. It's bringing people together, and great leaders can do that so well, so well. They can engage that, and they're not threatened by it, not threatened by it at all.
Yeah, exactly. It's like sometimes the image that I see on Instagram that a leader is sometimes behind the employees, are not that someone who's like on the clouds telling them to go do something when they are personally themselves are not, they are not doing it themselves. They are
Exactly.
not
Yes.
leading by example. Yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
definitely. Yeah. So what are, for example, the characteristics of the best leaders that I should look out for myself when I want to be a better one, a better leader?
Well, it's interesting you said that because I've really noticed, of course, there's always general leadership traits, but having gone through the pandemic and working with leaders at all levels and across industries, and in our book, Hope for Leaders in the 2020s, I kind of narrowed it down to 4 things that I think leading post pandemic is going to require of us as leaders. And I came up with an acronym because for those people that know me, I love to make it accessible. I love to make it common sense, because what I find is that a lot of leadership is common sense that's not common practice.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yes,
it's
exactly.
like,
Yeah.
it's like, what do you mean yelling at somebody's not working? I'm like, well, think about it, think about it. But I developed this acronym for love, leading with love. And my HR friends loved it because they're like, whoa, you can't talk about love in the workplace. I'm like, but yet you can. And so when you break it down and you think about what does it take, not only to be a great leader, but just a good human being in general, it starts with listening. And that's what the L stands for. It's a
Mm.
listening ear. Because one of the best qualities that the most amazing leaders I've ever worked for have had is the ability to listen and to not judge, not to be more curious than critical. And to be curious, you have to ask good questions. You have to sit back, you have to take it in. You have to assume that you don't know everything. You have
Exactly.
to, in certain situations, assume positive intent. And that's, that can be challenging for some when they've been in it a long time. The second part of it is having an objective mind. And that really goes with, trying not to put your, projection into something, trying to be objective in this situation and not always assuming someone's motive or why they've done something. And, that can be hard as a leader if you always do that, if people are feeling judged. And, the third one, if we haven't learned this one through the pandemic, you've missed a great opportunity. A versatile attitude. We can't always do things the way we've always done things. And
Exactly.
honestly, today's employment world, they are not allowing us to do things the way that we've always done things. And I've worked with some organizations that as soon as the pandemic, the worst part of it passed, they required everybody to come back into the office. Even though for 2 years people had successfully found another way to work. And people said, okay, bye, see ya. I mean, they didn't, it's that, so we were versatile for the time that we had to be, but now we're not. So as leaders, just really thinking about how do we do business differently? How do we embrace that? Because when I hear people say, I just want it to go back to the way that it was, there is no back to the way that it was. I don't call it, I call it the new normal. It's how are we evolving? And we're still figuring that out. We are really still figuring that out. And then the last piece of love is having an empathetic heart. You don't have to have gone through what someone's gone through to understand that they're going through something. And all of us on our journeys go through something. But those leaders that are able to be empathetic to those situations and to really just, again, listen with that objective mind and be versatile in how we approach things, I really am seeing that be the way that we're going to have to lead in the future. And not to say that we shouldn't have led that way anyway. It's almost demanding that we lead that way now. And you're seeing people, as I said, not afraid to go if they're not getting those needs met. I mean, the world right now is it's just an employee's game. I mean, there's so many opportunities open that if this one's not working out, I've had friends that quit and had nothing. They just quit. It wasn't a good situation. They didn't feel that they were heard. They didn't feel recognized. They didn't feel like they were making a difference. And so they left. And it's, today I think we have to, as leaders, look at what are we doing to influence somebody to want to be there or to not want to be there. And that's why I say it really goes to that self-awareness piece.
Exactly. So because empathy is very important, like you mentioned earlier, a lot of people quit because of the people or the leaders that are there. It's not just now money, paycheck is important, yes, but it's like there is a balance between that and the people that you are working with, right? So if you are working with the people or the leaders that are driving the organization does not have any empathy for the people, because eventually we are not like 50, 100 years ago, like you have to work as a machine, everything is developed. Like maybe in every organization now is about, I don't know, I'm just saying maybe 50% of things are automated now. So you need some people to work things over these automations. But people need to be developed, need to be nurtured, need to be heard and understood.
Yes. And just, I want to feel like you care about me. I want to feel like you care about me. And the best leaders, I've always felt that. I felt like they cared about my well-being. They were checking in with me. Now, they didn't let me get away with things. I mean, they still held me accountable to do things, but there was that empathetic heart that, if things were going, not well, it's like, what can I do? What can I do to support you? What can I do to really lean in and help you? And as I said, I don't think we can move away from that today. I think that that's how we are being called to lead today from all that we've gone through the last couple of years.
So how would you think the solution to a certain problem would be to have this kind of mindset shift to make leaders more empathetic, to have them share of their opinion, to make the employees like, I don't know, stand up for what they actually want?
Absolutely. And the leaders that I saw struggle the most during the pandemic were more of that mindset of the old way of doing things, that micromanagement, that if I can't see you, I can't trust you're working on something. I think you're not doing work if I can't see that you're doing that. And they really, really struggled through that time of, being able to trust. And the leaders that already had some of what we're talking about, their teams thrived during the pandemic. It was everything. They probably got more done because we were finding more efficient ways to get there. We realized not everything had to be an in-person meeting. If we're cross town in offices, you and I could just jump on Zoom and have, a 15, 20-minute meeting, and then boom, we jump off and we go back to the next thing. When you think about just the efficiency of time with things, and it's, as you and I were talking about, this doesn't replace us being able to connect in person when we're able to do that. But I really believe it's going to become more of a hybrid. And so that versatile attitude is becoming so much more important now of we can't work like we used to work because that doesn't work anymore. So, how do we open ourselves up to that and lean into our teams and asking them, like what's working for you? What would be a good work model? And I'm working with a lot of organizations now that after the pandemic, they brought teams together. They did focus groups. Let's take the best of what worked during this time. Let's get rid of the things that didn't. And, what do we want to leave behind pre-pandemic? And then what do we kind of want to bring forward? But it was a collaborative conversation. It wasn't, a leader saying, oh no, we're going to go back doing it this way because this is what I feel most comfortable with.
No, it's a team job. So you mentioned meetings. So Usually in general, meetings happen in businesses or corporation when there is some kind of a problem, or there's something that the company or the big business corporation want to announce to employees, right? So where where can these meetings can be beneficial actually?
They can. And, there's a great book, and I think it's called Death by Meeting. it's, it is because, like you said, you think about how much time we spend in meetings, especially if your company is a culture of meeting a lot. And I've encouraged leaders to do a meeting audit, to look at all of the meetings that they are attending or they're requiring people to attend. Are these the meetings that you should be going to? Are these the meetings that you should be leading? And if people that you are inviting to these meetings, virtual or in person, don't understand their purpose for being there, why are they there? And I read a statistic somewhere that said over 70% of meetings are not productive.
Yeah.
Because there's no, like, what's the ROI? And there's even, you can get an app. Of course, we live in a world of apps for everything, but you can even download an app or get an app that will kind of calculate an approximate cost for you of a meeting. So let's say you have 10 people in this meeting, and it gives you a formula to, like, the average salary, benefits, blah, 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 blah. So let's say you met for an hour. The meeting cost you roughly $50,000. When you start monetizing it, say to yourself, did we just get $50,000 return on investment for what we just set through? And when people say this could have been an email, this could have been an instant message, this could have been, it's just, I really say, let's become more intentional with that time. And let's look at a given day, and nobody's calendar should be back to back, because you're gonna fail someone. If your schedule is 1 to 2, 2 to 3, there's no way. You don't have any time to transition. And so when I'm working with leaders, I'm like, be mindful and intentional about your schedule. What are you attending? Do you need to be attending it? Are these meetings you need to be leading? And give yourself space in between that. Give your team members space. Just, don't look at, oh, they've got an opening from 1 to 2 and everything else around it's booked. And people do that. They'll look at your calendar and they're like, oh, you're free. Not thinking they've got to transition from one thing to another thing to get through that. So I'm a huge fan of scheduling time with myself on my calendar, and
Yeah.
it may even say meeting with self. And you can't, that's that half an hour. I need to transition from one thing to another thing so that I can be present in that next thing. That's why meetings are really unsuccessful, because we're not present. We're still in the last meeting.
Yeah, you are thinking about something else, or like when you are in a meeting, the employees start thinking, "Oh, they are delaying my work. I actually have to go like every now and this."
Yes,
and
and they're
and
not there. Yeah, they're
yeah,
not
and like you
present.
mentioned, most of the meetings, like at least 75% or 70%, are like basically useless. That can be sent through email sometimes,
They can.
or this meeting that is taking 60 minutes could be like fine a meeting, but maybe 2 minutes meeting. So
And yes, and just starting, ending on time. I mean, just some of the basics. Like I say, a lot of it's common sense. And I go to these meetings, I'm like, no wonder people are sitting there on their phones or on their laptops that they say they're taking notes. They're doing whatever. They're shopping on Amazon. But I think I'm not blaming that. I'm saying, if that's what's happening in a meeting, you as a leader of a meeting, that's on you. It's like, everybody should feel they have a reason to be there and something to contribute. And if people feel like that and come to that, it is a different type of meeting. It is a very different type of meeting.
yeah. So what would you say some of the, maybe let's say, best advice or the worst advice that someone told you about leaders and leadership?
The worst advice I've probably gotten goes into some of the best advice that I ever got, was delegating. And I had a leader that was probably more of an example of what not to be than what to be. And, his advice was, if you can do it yourself, just do it. Don't bother your people with it. And, to some extent, there's some truth in that. But to flip that, one of the best leaders I said is, he would say, find people you can delegate to. That's going to be one of your biggest things as a leader, that you will never be able to go higher or do more, nor will your people, if you don't delegate and develop them. And the difference in the advice was from one leader that he was the one that when good things would happen, he would take credit, and when bad things would happen, he would be quick to blame the team. That he had no accountability or
Mm.
responsibility. It was someone on the team, and I believe for him, looking back, this was earlier on in my management career. Delegating was a threat for him. He didn't. There were certain things he didn't want to let go of. He wanted to be the only one that knew how to do it. And that is a very dangerous place as a leader, for you to be the only one that knows how to do something.
Yeah,
And,
this to me means, in this situation, for example, this means two things. Either that guy wants to get all the credit for the work, for example,
Mhm.
or like we talked about, like it's sometimes trust that they are not doing a good job. So if these guys or these people are not doing a good job, why are they there? Like,
Yes, and
this could be.
so yeah, I mean, it was just interesting, the difference in advice. I'm like, oh my gosh. And now when I'm working with leaders, a lot of them struggle with delegating for that reason of the leader that told me, if you can do it yourself, just do it. You need to have things that are your things. And I don't disagree with that. There's roles that we play and there's things that we do. But just like I recommend doing a meeting checklist, kind of an audit of, are these purposeful things? I say the same things to leaders. Look at all the things that you're doing in a given day. What are all the are you doing the right things? Are you saying yes to the right things? Are these the best things for you to be working on? Or some of these things it would be better served for your team to do, so that you can work on things that are going to help them in the long run. And that's not always that task-based thing. And it's hard when people transition into leadership, because they used to be the doobie. The doobie, just checking things off and feeling that sense of completion. And when you become a leader, it's more of a constant flow of, you may not have that feeling every day, because you're working on a bigger strategic plan, or you're putting, something together where you're more of the visionary. You're not the one that's doing every task. You can't be. It's just not possible. So yeah, I love that question, because it was an interesting thing of some of the best and the worst. And now I'm finding, I mean, even, having my own business now, I have to delegate. I know nothing about putting a website together. I have an amazing person that is my person. He does it, and it's like, if I'm working on all of these things, am I really doing the work that is my lane, the
Yeah,
best thing for
exactly.
me? And it's like, I get distracted from my purpose if I'm doing some of the things that maybe aren't my things to do. There are people that can do that. That's what they do.
You have to find the best things that, and keep doing the best thing that you can in your
Yes.
area or your field or your skills. Like, because here in your example, like for example, if you yourself are running or operating your website, that will take a lot of time from the business that you are doing,
Mm-hmm.
which right. So that will, it's not going to work well for you. So
It
you
is
have
not.
to delegate. Yes.
And it would look awful, because that's not what I do. But then it's like, I'm taken away from developing training. I'm taken away from, developing relationships with clients, which are things that I need to be doing for my business. And that's no different than any leader. It's, if I'm constantly engaged in these tasks that are taking away, my sole purpose or my greater purpose, then I'm not focused on the right things. And then you also have to be, what is that communicating to your team? What example is that being for them when you're doing that? So as
Exactly.
leaders, I say, you just always have to be aware people are watching, and for you to be that example. And if you're saying one thing and you're doing another, that becomes a really great conflict. And in general, people don't want to follow people. Like, it's like, well, you're saying this, but you're doing this. I mean, I go back to the parenting thing. It's like, well, you said no, don't do that, but I just watched you do it. And that do as I say, not as I do, does not work really well.
Yeah, exactly. Like as a leader, you have to stand your ground for whatever you say, even if you, like, for example, not new, but let's say that certain decision was wrong and it turns out to be wrong, right? You have to stand as a leader, you have to stand out for that decision and admit
Yes.
that it was wrong, for example. So,
Right. And just and own it.
yeah.
Own it. Don't blame. Just take accountability. I tell people all that all the time. When challenging situations happen, nothing squashes it faster than you go, you know what? I was wrong. I was wrong. I screwed up. We should have gone in this direction. We didn't. I didn't, and people, I want to work for someone like that. I want to work for someone that owns their actions and owns what they've done. And, if you want to develop people on your team to be able to do that, if you're the one that's doing this and you're pointing fingers at everybody else but yourself, well, it wasn't my fault. It was because of this or that, or this, and there are leaders I've worked with, and I'm sure in your career as well, that anything that ever happened was never their fault, ever. I mean, they could find somebody to take the fall for it. And I just, at the end of the day, I never respected that, because I'm like, I would respect you more, because nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. And,
Exactly.
I've coached some leaders that their goal was perfection. And I watched what happened with their team because they wouldn't take risk, because they feared failure, because in this leader's mind, it was about being perfect, which
It,
isn't,
do- it does not make any sense to me. So in general, if you are in a business or in an organization, you want to like grow like the business or grow, for
yes.
example, right? So if you want to stay perfect, and in this context, you mean not taking risks. So how do you develop as a person? How do you develop your team? How do you grow the company or business? So that
Exactly. You have to make failure an option, and I remember coming into my manager's office, and I'd made a mistake, and I was devastated. I mean, nobody's going to be harder on somebody than you, that when you fail. But I went in, and I mean, I was just like, I was ready to clean out my desk. I mean, I was just like, here's my resignation. And he looked at me and he goes, so what did you learn from that? And I told him, and he said, so if you were to come in tomorrow and had to make the same decision, would you make that decision the same way? And I'm like, oh my gosh, no, I would do it differently. He said, well, in my mind, then this has been a successful failure, because you've learned something. And in my own life, I say I've learned more from those failures than I have from the successes. Not that when I started off, my intent was to fail. I mean, I don't think anybody hopes when they start something like, I hope this just goes really bad. Doubtful. But sometimes it does. Sometimes it does, by circumstances that are beyond some of our control. But the accountability back is, how do you own that? How do you learn from that? How do you grow from that? How do you become better? And then, I love Henry Ford's quote about, it's failure's an opportunity to begin again more intelligently,
exactly.
if we use that wisdom. And if we don't, it's wasted. It's wasted
Exactly.
wisdom in my mind.
Awesome. Well, hope, where can people get in touch with you to learn more about you, your organization?
Well, they can find hope, if they would like to find some hope, on our website at www.hope, HOPE4FOR leaders.com. And I have a lot of resources available out there for them, that, and once, what I say is, once you've connected with me, I'm in your network, because as I said, it takes a village to raise us all. So there's ways that they can get in contact, and we have a free monthly e-newsletter that I put out that just provides practical
Yeah.
tips on how to be a great leader. And so, yes, if there's anything I can ever do to help make someone stronger, better, bring them hope, please reach out.
Awesome. I love it. Your hope, your organized hope. It's amazing. Like everything is working out for you on the name side.
That's what, well, and I tell people, I believe I was given this name for a reason. And if I can't bring you hope, I've said this to a number of people, if I can't bring you hope, I need to change my name. So
Well, thank you for being with me on
you're
this
very
episode of the
welcome.
SuccessGrid podcast live. Insightful, fun, and informative. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Saint. It's been a pleasure.